I'm Paul Lafrance, and you're listening to the Tools of the Trade podcast.
Welcome, please welcome
to another episode of the Tools of the Trade podcast, your number one construction industry resource. Hear conversations with industry professionals to get the tools, stories, and advice that you need to set your career on fire. You're now streaming the Tools of the Trade podcast.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Company Cam. What is Company Cam? Well, Company Cam is a solution. It's an app that allows you to manage your work in the field with smart photos. Every photo your crews take at a job is automatically organized by location using GPS and instantly synced from the field to wherever you are, and it is organized by project and further by tags and all sorts of other amazing things that you can do. So if you're at a project, let's say you're at a project and you take a picture, or one of your crews is documenting progress or something on a job, those pictures are then instantly accessible through the app or on the web for anyone within your organization to then view, mark up, comment, tag, and the list of things that you can do within Company Cam really does go on and on. You have to try it yourself to see. Before I found this app, I was looking for a solution to organize my project pictures because I constantly found myself scrolling back through my phone for hours trying to remember when and where I took specific pictures. And then I would have to subsequently upload those to whatever, Dropbox, Google Drive, my computer by dragging and dropping. And it started to get super unorganized and was always very painful and just super tedious to do. And then I would just stop taking pictures and things went out of control. But with Company Cam, you can say goodbye to those unorganized project photos and upload times no matter the project size. Like I mentioned, I am using Company Cam and I'm currently using it on a fairly complex project where we have multiple towers and multiple floors, and it's a large scope of work. It took me around 15 minutes to set up that project, create tags, and I did that tower by tower, floor by floor. And now when I'm doing site walks, I can simply open Company Cam, snap my pictures, tag them, and then click done. Once I get back into the office or onto my computer, I can log into companycam.com with my login credentials and then sort through all of my uploads. I can further tag them based on progress, such as rough-in, finishing, deficiencies, you name it. You create it yourself, whatever you want. Then you can even print PDF reports with comments for your clients or your stakeholders or anybody that's involved in the project. It is truly the project photo organization solution. There's been over 150 million pictures taken through Company Cam and over 7 million projects have been created. And personally, this app has saved me so much time and frustration. But really the best part is listeners of this podcast can now get Company Cam totally free for up to 3 users and 50 projects. Sign up is super easy and no credit cards required. It takes just a couple minutes. So to discover which plan fits your needs and to get you and your teams and projects organized, visit companycam.com/tools, enter your email, and away you go. That's companycam.com/tools to take back control of your project photo organization. What's going on, friends? Welcome to episode number 30 of the Tools of the Trade podcast. I am your host, Colin Toop, and if you've been listening along, you know that I created this podcast to not only shatter the blue-collar optics of the construction industry, but to provide you with valuable resources that you can use to accelerate your growth, get inspired, and crush it in your construction careers. Don't forget to go and follow me on social media, but especially and specifically Instagram at Tools Podcast. And the reason why I say Instagram is because each week I am going to be posting in my story which guests and which people I'm going to be having on the podcast so that you can submit your questions and I will do my best to consolidate all of those and get them answered for you. So again, head over to Instagram at Tools Podcast and contribute your questions to have them answered when the next guest goes live. With all that being said, today's guest is the one and only Paul Lafrance, the deck god, the deck guy, and he's probably more commonly known for his shows on HGTV, including Decked Out and Deck Wars. But it isn't the TV shows that make Paul who he is. Paul is really the most open and genuinely vulnerable person I've ever had the pleasure of speaking with. I came into this interview with a plan. I always try and do lots of research and formulate the best questions that I can think of to ask these guests. And within the first 10, 15 minutes, it was quickly derailed in the best way possible. Don't get me wrong, for what ended up being an amazing conversation between two guys about life, construction, diversity in trades, owning your mistakes and shortcomings, living the life that you would want to have written on your epitaph, and a little bit about Paul and his background and how he got into the things that he's into now. So I had a fantastic time talking to him. I really hope you enjoy this episode. And you can say hello to Paul and the team by heading over to paullafrancedesign.com. That's Paul, LAFRANCE design.com. Now, please join me in welcoming the one and only deck god, Paul Lafrance. Paul, welcome to Tools of the Trade, man. I'm so happy to have you on.
Thanks for having me on, bud.
Before we get into it, over the past few weeks, my dad has become my biggest fan and he's been messaging me nonstop. So I want to just pause quickly and give him a shout out. Shout out to Big Al. And when I told him that I was having you on my podcast, he lost his mind because he's been following you for a long time. So I just wanted to give a quick shout out to my old man because he's been following along. And Dad, if you're listening, thanks for being a big support. And we'll hopefully crush this one with Paul for you.
We have to crush it now because you're watching. I have to impress you too. This is now two of us have to be impressive.
That's it.
All right, no pressure. Let's do this.
The pressure's on. Well, for anybody that doesn't know you, Paul, why don't you give us the quick, like 30 to 60-second bio of who you are, where you're from, and where people may have seen or heard of you before?
How do I describe me? I was 12 years old. I just turned 11, and I'm about to turn 10 because I'm Benjamin Buttoning this shit. And yeah, so I started my own company, the high school dropout with no business training, no design training. And at the time, the common sense of a small pony, I started Paul Lafrance Design when I was 22 or 23. I'm now 123. So it's been a while. And that ended up leading to me being approached by people in the television world saying, you should have your own TV show. And I said, sure, because why not? Life's an adventure. And that's led to a number of different shows: Decked Out, Deck Wars, Disaster Decks, Custom Built, Canada's Handyman Challenge, Home to Win. I think I was on an episode of 24 once, and invented time travel, but I haven't shared that with the rest of the world yet. So this is the first time it is on this podcast that I'm going to be finally declaring for the first time that I have invented time travel.
Well, let's get into it. Where have you been in the last 24 hours then?
Well, I would like to share that with you, but then I'd have to kill you. So you see, because then that'll spread, and then people will find out where I've been and what I've changed, and it'll all end up coming back to me. So it's about plausible deniability. This is the part where I have to keep that in mind. Yeah.
Sounds good. So if you want the blueprint to time travel, you got to sign up for my newsletter. You got to head over. You got to watch Paul's new show, Backyard Revolution. And then if you answer the correct security question, you might get the blueprint for time travel, but you have to complete all those first.
It's going to be a hell of a good security question.
Yeah, that's it.
It's a really good security question.
Right on, man. Well, hey, what's going on in your world right now? Like, you know, with COVID, and obviously we've been talking about it to death here, and I'm sure that we're all a little sick and tired. Before we got started, we mentioned that this whole social distancing thing is becoming a bit annoying, but I'm curious what's going on in your world. Like, are people looking into their backyard to create those spaces because they're forced to stay home? Have you noticed an increase in that, or what are you seeing from your side?
Yeah, it was actually surprising. I thought everything would just bottom right out as far as the construction industry in general, but particularly the backyards, because you would think, well, it's not necessarily considered like this is a necessity for life. It's not like we need a bathroom, it's like
Right.
I need a backyard oasis. But yeah, I think it's people have been more so been looking out there going, well, if I'm not going anywhere and I can't do anything, I might as well make my backyard my staycation, my oasis, my personal retreat, and particularly when you have kids crawling up the walls. So yeah, I've actually been finding a lot, like nothing has really slowed for me in that capacity now that we're actually allowed to go out and build again. Plus I had a lot of projects that I was just finishing up and some rather large ones. So that's going on. But I think the main thing that I've been doing is just kind of the final preps for the release of Backyard Revolution, which is a whole other topic. But when you're releasing something in a way that no one else has ever done, because that's the way I like to do things, completely the way no one else has ever done it, because I'm nuts. That's been taking up a lot of my time. So it's been a 2.5-year journey, Backyard Revolution. So this whole pandemic hasn't affected me per se in the same way that it's affected most other people, because I was kind of just, I'm like, it's kind of been status quo. I've just been continuing to finish things off when I'm working, designing. But it's nice when you live on the water, when you have four teenage daughters who are homebound. I don't know if you've heard of hormones. Have you heard of these things?
Yeah, it sounds vaguely familiar.
Yeah, yeah. So take like four teenage girls in the house and then take those hormones and imagine them, it's like a big roaring bonfire anyway, and
Right.
then take like napalm and gasoline and just pour it all on top, and that's what happens when you have a global pandemic that tells your hormonal teenagers they can't go anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. In you speaking, you've got so much going on in your life, right? You have Paul Lafrance Design, then you have the cutting edge construction, and then you've got all the stuff that you're doing on TV, whether it's for the network or for yourself. What percentage of your time is split between stuff that you're recording for the public to see and stuff that you're actually doing behind the scenes for private clients?
So I mean, I've got an amazing team behind me when it comes to our private clients. It's kind of a nice position to be in now where the ones that I will personally involve myself in, well, they kind of have to align with me being the ADHD person that I am, which I fully admit as being my greatest gift, not a disorder. That's a whole topic I can go into about the world of ADHD and how many parents have had come up to me going, "Oh my gosh, little Johnny and Sally might actually not have a disorder." I'm like, "No, they have a gift. You just have to mold it correctly."
Right.
So it can be a bit tiring because of the fact that I'm always doing at least five or six different things at once, and all of them are, of course, very, very important. So I'd probably say right now at this particular time, finishing some rather wild projects. Like the one I'm finishing right now is has a large waterfall going down into a spa or going down into a moat with an island, with fire
What?
and outdoor, three season outdoor rooms and a putting green and a helicopter landing pad and zombie defense system, the normal stuff. So it's one of my masterpieces, I would say, and it's and those always take the longest to do, and so I'm kind of personally involved in this particular one just to get this thing done, because then I have some videos to shoot on it, which we'll be showing the world.
Right.
See, what I'm doing with BYR, which is the short cool form for Backyard Revolution, there's some secrets behind the making of this show that I've yet to reveal. Similar to the time machine thing.
Right.
And I'm pretty excited about this little piece of information hitting the public because it's going to be kind of surprising. But it also has another deeper purpose behind it. And that's also, it's going to be something that will be helping artists of all kinds. And people don't usually associate the trades with artists, but they are one and the same.
Yep.
And the term artist, artisan, which is how tradespeople were referred to pre-industrial revolution, before factories came in, and all of a sudden being in the trades became synonymous with like stamping license plates or putting caps on toothpaste bottles.
Right.
It's an initiative that I'm going to be doing that's going to be helping the artists or artisans around the world know how to be able to actually truly make a living doing what you love to do, using the new world that we have. This is pre-COVID, just the world of the ability to pass information around so quickly, which is unprecedented throughout history. So that's going to be really cool. That's a kind of a near and dear to my heart type of endeavor, which again, I'm keeping intentionally vague for the sake of mystery.
And when can we expect to know more about that?
I would probably say this summer,
Okay.
or maybe in the early fall. But first and foremost, it's Backyard Revolution we did a soft launch on the show. We were just kind of testing it because we're releasing this. We've gone around the networks with this, you see.
That's right.
So it's self-released in the same way that it was with the music industry, because I wanted to make a show that was not limited to the 22-minute formulaic, like, yeah, we're gonna bang off 1 and they're great. And don't get me wrong, I'm extremely proud of everything, of all the shows that I've done, and great connection with the network, and particularly with Architect Films and my buddy Mike Sharon, who is my partner in crime in making all these shows. But I'm a storyteller. I'm fascinated by people's stories, and But more so than that, I think my big personal like apple box that I stand up on is talking about the absolute necessity and the need for true vulnerability and true authenticity. And reality TV is not, let's just say that it's, I think a lot of people would look at it and be like, this is kind of the furthest thing from reality a lot of the times.
Yeah, you know what? I wanted to ask you about that because, on one hand, if you're in the construction industry, that's probably the biggest gripe with the network is you see the 22-minute, you see the people come in, and then you see the before and after. You don't necessarily see what's going on. And I believe that in your Backyard Revolution, you've recorded what 14 episodes about one project,
That's right.
and so you're showcasing the behind the scenes, the work, the people, the crews, the arguments, the mistakes. And first of all, I want to thank you for doing that for the industry and being real. But why did you decide to keep it so real and go off and do this yourself? Like, what's the driver?
Driver is every show that I ever made previous to this, there is so many real stories that were, they're just end up on the cutting room floor because you have this tight format. And I think the best way to explain this would be just watching the way that we watch television now, right? There's a reason why A-list Hollywood actors are leaving the silver screen to become involved in a TV series because that's what we're watching now. That's what we are drawn to. And the reason why we're drawn to it is because we like real characters. Like, the age of the 2-hour movie with Bruce Willis, and he's like this unidimensional character. And yes, he has some things, but he's going to go blow a bunch of things up and save the world. And maybe you get a few inches below the surface, but you don't really know who he is.
Yeah.
Like, I want to know the history of Hans Gruber from Die Hard. I want to know what made him who he was. He was this fascinating character, and everyone remembers Hans, like, and he's this villain guy, right? And I find that oftentimes villains can become way more interesting to look into. And that's why Joker was such a big thing and had been this repeated character.
100%.
But it's a study into one character. In a TV series, so I avoided like TV series forever because I'm like highly prone to addiction. And everyone was trying to get me to watch Breaking Bad for so long. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. I can't get into those because then I'll be like, I'll become addicted. And eventually the series was over and I'm like, okay, I'm going to watch it now. Because I don't feel like sitting around like an asshole, like waiting for the next one to come out next week. Right.
Yeah.
So I end up watching the pilot of Breaking Bad. And this is all circling around to a point. I watched the pilot for Breaking Bad. And 3 weeks later, I had watched 63 episodes. And I'm like, oh my God, this is my point. And then everyone's like, you like that? You're going to love Sons of Anarchy. You have to watch Sons of Anarchy. And then I'm like, I know I'm going to end up under a bridge going, where is my wife and children? Where has everyone gone? Because you get drawn into these characters, right? Like,
Yeah.
you get drawn into like Jesse Pinkman and Walter White because you're learning so much about them as flawed human beings, right? And then I remember my wife, Janice, she's like, do you mind if I watch my show? Because I do, so she talks to her. Do you mind if I watch my show? And I'm like, no. After I watched it, I said, no more TV for me. And she's watching Suits. And then the first character I was drawn to as I'm looking over, I'm like, who's that guy? Was this guy, Louis Litt, the guy that you love to hate. Like, you love him in one episode and you want to murder him in the next. And he's this deeply flawed, complex character that is one of the most brilliant characters I'd ever seen on television. That is why the draw to doing a TV series where you have the opportunity, say, as an actor, to play a Gregory House, right? To play a Carrie Matheson, to play a Louis Litt, right? To play a, what's her name, Melanie Gray or whatever on Grey's Anatomy. I didn't watch that one. But you can delve into a story arc with people. But in the world of reality construction, renovation television, it's like Bob and Sally, they really have a bad backyard and they would love to have a place where they can relax and see their friends. Like, it's just the same thing.
Right.
Meanwhile, Bob and Sally are like these amazing, complex people who have complex lives and things that can relate. And on that particular building of that episode, like, I made some terrible mistakes, as far as what ends up on TV. I'm like, wearing a cape and standing there just like, da, 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 like everything is perfect the first time. And people love when they see something that's actually real, right? So you can't do 14 episodes on one project, Paul. People will get bored. And I'm like, not if it's done right, not if it's a story, not if it's something that's following an arc of something where, yes, it's entertaining, Yes, it's educational. Like you are getting all of those. Like there's 45 different unique products featured on Backyard Revolution, and some of them are completely revolutionary ones. Like they're just stuff I've never even seen. I'm like, holy shit, this is amazing. But on top of that, you have this wild card element, and that is me screwing up, right? And that's the part where people are like, well, you can't show that because if you show that you screw up, people are going to lose confidence in you. You're going to lose your aura of like, I'm the man. And I find that that's bullshit. The opposite is true, right? So here's an example. Many years ago, I was doing a conference in on Earth, and this guy comes up to me afterwards because when I'm doing public speaking, which I love to do, I love speaking to like whether it's kids in high school, teachers. I love speaking to teachers, with rooms full of aliens at Area 51. I love speaking. So in this particular time, so I'm always sharing and like I'm always being really truthful in a way that disarms people. It disarms people when I'm announcing that I'm like a high school dropout. Like in episode 3 of the Backyard Revolution, I like basically turn the camera and go, by the way, I'm a complete and total fraud, right? And you'll have to watch it to see the context. But I left the stage, and this young guy, right, probably was probably around your age, comes up to me, and this guy is he's a genius. Like he actually invented the plugin for the design software that I use to design my projects on. And this guy is like amazingly successful guy, and he is sitting there, and he's in tears, and he's like, dude, you have to help me understand something. Like, how could you be so vulnerable? Like, aren't you worried about what people will think about you? Not from like an insecurity standpoint, but just from a perspective that it could maybe affect your business. And I looked at him and I was like, all right, Lee, the only reason you're going to say that is because there's something that you've been hiding from the world for years. And he immediately, without dropping a beat, goes, yeah, I'm dyslexic. And I was like, huh. And he goes, yeah, I've been hiding this from the world, even from people within my own company for years, because I'm afraid if people find out I'm dyslexic, they'll be like, oh, well, we can't trust him now because he's dyslexic. And I said, Lee, I love you, buddy, but you're an idiot, because it's the opposite is true. People will respect you more, relate to you more, and trust you more if you're like, this is what I've done, this is what I've created, and I'm completely dyslexic. People are going to be like, that's awesome. And the fact that you said that, the fact that you announced that, the fact that you led with that, the fact that you're not afraid of that only makes people go, I can now instantaneously connect because I know my limitations that I do not want anyone else in the world to know about. But I know what I'm capable of doing too, despite my limitations. And the fact that that guy said it makes me inspired, but he's also got the balls to say it. So, and something that I would have difficulty saying, but he's saying it and being that honest, I now trust this person. It's true. But guys have a particularly hard time with this because we're programmed from the time we're little boys to be like, if you don't know something, it means you're weak. You're not really a man. Like,
honey, are you lost? No, I'm not lost.
I'm not lost. What do you mean read the instruction manual? I don't know. I have a blooper in the show where I'm like reading an instruction manual and I'm just like, oh, hi. Don't mind me. I'm so embarrassed. Like, you caught me reading an instruction manual. Oh, I make this whole bit about it. Because I like to actually put something together and not forget a certain screw that's going to say cause a fire, and then later I'm like, whoa, I didn't need a manual. Like, it's just so stupid.
Yeah.
The way our thinking is. And all of this is on display in this show where it's like, hey, I wanted to create something with a particular pattern of building I wanted to do something particular with the decking because for the same reason why people climb Mount Everest, because I wanted to prove that I could do it. I wanted to build my own oven in a way that no one's ever been able to master, even though I know there's heating blankets out there, but I wanted to do this way. I wanted to prove that I could do it this way. And I wanted to bend 20-foot boards, and I wanted to do it like those magazine articles where you see this deck hanging over the edge of a cliff and everything is curved. And I'm like, I want to do that in real life, not just, through the magic of CG. So that's what I attempted to do. And I failed greatly and threw $30,000 into a toilet. And the camera's right here. That's the show.
So we're obviously going to see that when we get to watch it. But I have so many questions. Like you mentioned, we're socially conditioned to be a certain way. You come out as a young man and you think that vulnerability is victimhood, that if you're vulnerable, that you're showing weakness and all this stuff. At what point did you throw that out the window? Because I'm assuming you didn't just pop out of your mom's stomach, like being vulnerable and running around saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And I'm sure that there's been a point in your life where you're like, you're a musician, you're a very creative guy, you're an artist, as you mentioned before, you support the artisans. And I'm assuming I'm putting two and two together here, and correct me if I'm wrong. There was a point where you decided, I'm not going to let my shortcomings hold me back anymore. I'm going to be open and honest and vulnerable about it. And I'm going to do all the things that I want to do, that I have the power to do. Like, when did you have that switch?
I think I have the blessing of having a brain. So here's one of the benefits of being fast-minded, or as the world likes to call it, ADHD. So when I was diagnosed with ADHD at age 35, the guy that diagnosed me was like, dude, Paul, like, come here, sit down. Let me explain to you what this really is. And he sits me down and he says, he's like, first and foremost, you don't have a disorder. We've covered that. He said, but if you have to call it a disorder to make the people of the world feel comfortable, it'd be more appropriate to call it IDD, which is interest deficit disorder, which means that if your brain is not interested in something, the blood is not flowing in the frontal portion of it, it's going to the back. So things like picking your clothes up off the floor or like taking out the garbage. I had an excuse to be able to eventually say to my wife, when she's like, hey, do you mind taking the garbage out, picking your clothes up? And I'd be like, well, sorry, honey, but I'm just not interested. So never, ever say that to your wife. Because when I regained consciousness a few minutes later after being hit with a rolling pin that came out of a holster, I don't know how she had that so close by, I understood that there was the flip side to all of this. And that is, if you are interested in something, you are hyper focused and you're typically going to be better at it than most other people.
Right.
But you're going to need help in the other areas of your life, like the things that aren't interesting to you. You're going to need help with those. But because what you do really well will typically be something that's going to be of an outward benefit. So, leading to your question, it means that you're going to end up being a humble person because of the fact that there's a bunch of shit that you do terribly, right? People might see what I do really well, but if you follow me around, you're going to find out pretty fast there's, there's a lot of stuff I'm terrible about. Like, being on time for a podcast, for instance. If I didn't have my wife, I'd be in a ditch on fire. But to be able to take the balance of the two worlds, the other benefit is you can't pretend anything, because you can't pretend to like something. You can't pretend to be something if it's not real. Like, being ADHD, there isn't some great revelatory moment I had where I was in like a cave on LSD or something, and then I came out and I was like, oh, no, I see how the world should be. That's why I can't endorse a product that I don't like. I don't care if I will give you a suitcase full of money and the keys to time travel, and I'll still be like, no, sorry. They're like, look, just money. Look at it, and you can travel back in time. And I'd be like, it's not about me having I have this high moral standard. It's like, no, the brain is going, not interested. So I know I will not be able to do it.
Yeah.
So it's a benefit. So for me, when I see people that are truly authentic, I'm drawn to them. They interest me because I feel like there's a power to being truly authentic. And in a world where the Facebook generation, it's like, yes, I have 5,000 Facebook friends and we're all very close. Like, it's all bullshit. Like, it's like nonsense. And, we're putting our best foot forward. What's my best side? We are starving for real. We're starving for anything that's truly authentic. But the worry is, well, if it's something that's authentic, what if it's authentic and boring? That's why they dramatize things to begin with, to make them entertaining. Mm-hmm. But if you can be authentic and be entertaining and be educational, now you've got a show. So I would say I just came by it honestly because of just the way my brain was made. It's not some result of coming back from a monastery in Tibet. Does that answer your question? I don't know.
Yeah, you know what? It does answer my question. But, in thinking this, if somebody's listening to this, they're like, man, I'm having such a hard time being open and honest and vulnerable in front of other people. What advice would you give them?
That is a very good question, because then it's like, well, I guess if I don't have your kind of brain, then I guess I can't be vulnerable and authentic. And it's like, no, absolutely not. Because the reason why we shift thinking is through. That is what education is. That's how we learn, right? So if somebody's watching me or other people that are being truly vulnerable and authentic and not afraid, it's a classic example of saying, okay, I'll answer that question by telling a story. So very, very commonly, I'll do public speaking in groups of men. And here's just one particular evening in a group of men in Toronto where I am leading from the stage, talking in a way that's already disarmed everybody, because they thought I was going to be talking about, like, whatever, the latest deck clips or some bullshit like that, which is, which has its place. But if I'm going to be on stage talking to a group of men and I'm going to talk about what best deck clips to do, I'd rather have shards of glass in my eye, like, give me a break. So in this particular case, I'm sharing this. I'm like going, and this is what you think of me. This is what, first and foremost, you probably all thought I would be taller, so there's funny. And also like, oh, because you remember, guys are looking at other guys, and the first thing we're thinking is, do you think you're better than me? Do you think you're better than me?
You're sizing them up.
You're trying to gauge the other person's level of ego and whether or not I'm going to be there going, I'm here and you're here. You see the difference? Do you see the difference? That's what people are wondering. And particularly if you're on TV and in this like celebrity realm thing, which is just, I was on a soapbox preaching against the sickness of North American celebrityism until God proved he had a sense of humor by making me one, which was very funny. So I'm on stage and I'm leading this particular charge, and I'm talking about vulnerability. I'm talking about my life and the high school dropout, the no training, having no business doing what I'm doing, and then talking about things like balancing work life and how much I have screwed up, in areas of my marriage, and screwed up with my own kids, and just been like not found the balance, and then coming home late at the end of the day, and then like freaking out on my daughters, and I think that I'm right, and later I'm going, oh my God, I might be a monster, and then have I scarred them for life? All the guys are just like they're all looking around. And then I'll say the key question, and this is the point. I'll say something along the lines of, does anyone in this room relate to what I'm talking about? And I'm expecting there to be an awkward delay because I'm going to provide it. And I'm going to sit back and wait. And the room, you can feel the energy and the tension level in the room just rise, right? It's just rising. And everyone is looking around, is like, is anyone going to say anything? And is Paul ever going to break the awkward silence until somebody does? Like clockwork, you wait and somebody puts his hand up. So there's this guy, I think it was Fred or Frank or Minke, I remember his name. Finally, this guy puts his hand up and goes, I relate. After what was about, I would probably say 25 seconds. Now, 25 seconds doesn't sound like a long time. 25 seconds in an auditorium full of people
is a long time.
Yeah. And he's like, I relate. And what happens in that room is fascinating. All of a sudden, you've got 300 other guys all go, whew. They're all looking at Frank, because in their minds, they are convinced that this guy agreeing with me about these areas of vulnerability, because of our programming as men, that something bad's about to happen to Frank. It's not rational. It's not logical. Like, they believe somewhere in their, super subconscious, that a meteorite is about to hit Frank, that he's about to spontaneous combust or have explosive diarrhea. Something bad's going to happen to Frank. It's not rational. It's just fear, because Frank has admitted what all the rest of us constantly think, particularly on the areas of going, I feel like I might be a fraud. I feel like I may not measure up. I feel like maybe I don't have what it takes to do what I'm doing. All that stuff.
Yeah.
So everyone looks at Frank, and then Frank and I start talking, and then all of a sudden, all the guys in the room are looking around and going, Frank didn't die. Frank's alive. And no one else is throwing stones at Frank. And then all of a sudden, somebody else will be like, well, I agree too. And then another guy's like, okay, well, if two guys are doing it, I agree, because I'm desperate to actually feel alive and real and not afraid of my, my own internal fears in my mind. And within 10 minutes, like a wildfire, this spreads through a room of 300 men. And by the end of this night, guys are walking out to me going, like, some crying and just being like, oh my God, this was the best night of my life. Like I've never felt so like free just to be me without having to worry about anyone judging me or thinking that I'm less than them. Like the ego is sucked out of the room. And that's powerful. That I can spend the rest of my life being a part of because it helps men stop trying to be men in this false, toxic, confusing modern day world, particularly in the realm of construction, where there are some icons out there that whether it was meant to or not have created this sense of like this is what you understand what I'm saying?
100%. And, thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing that. Cause I think you mentioned that exactly. It's so important. You know what? I feel the same way a lot of times. Like I'm here, I'm interviewing you, and like 90% of my life, I wake up and I feel like an imposter. Who the hell am I? Why do I have the privilege of sitting down and having a conversation with Paul Lafrance?
Right.
Who the hell am I? I'm just some kid in construction and like all this shit's happened in my life. But my ego doesn't want to tell anybody that stuff.
Right.
So thank you for sharing. And I think
I've
anybody,
had, dude, like seriously, and you have to sometimes kick the door in. So I'm a huge student of psychology, and this type of stuff, this isn't being taught in courses, at least
right?
not yet until I can figure out, oh, I'd love to put this into a course. But then people are gonna be like, no, you're just trying to monetize it. I'm like, ah, shit, I don't want to ruin the point by suddenly making it look like I'm trying to sell somebody something. I don't. This is just truth. And I know that it really impacts people. But what I mean by the whole psychology factor is it's programming. We are programmed, and it's very difficult for us to recognize programming. It's like I went down to Mexico, and when I was in my early 20s, and I was hanging out with this guy who was a lunatic. He was out doing things in middle America, helping people, but they didn't want him there. We were like, we want you to leave because you're screwing things up. And he was just like, go ahead and shoot me and kill me. And I was like standing right beside this man going like, I was very inspired because he just wasn't afraid.
Yeah.
He wasn't afraid. And then he looked at me and he's like, don't ever think that I'm not afraid. I am afraid, but fear pisses me off. And I was like, never forgot that. The fear pisses me off.
Interesting.
It's like being controlled by an addiction. It's like my uncle gets up one day and he smokes 2 packs a day for like, whatever, 120 years. And one day he gets up to go to the bathroom and he's half asleep and he walks by the kitchen and he looks over and he's like half sleepwalking and his cigarettes are sitting on the counter. And then he goes over and then lights up a cigarette. And then he wakes up. It's 2 a.m. and he's sitting there trying not to piss himself, smoking his cigarette. And then was just like, what am I doing? And he realized the power that this cigarette had over him in that moment, but he didn't realize it before.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't realize it. And he went and never smoked again. He realized this thing was controlling him, right? So go back to the fear thing. When we realize how much fear controls our life, our fear of being exposed, our fear of what other people are going to think of us, our fear of maybe I'm going to say some sort of creative idea and people are going to go, it's stupid. That fear should piss you off because it's controlling you like that cigarette was controlling my uncle, right? This is the message. And when you realize that, when you like punch that and just actually go, I'm going to push the envelope on this by just attacking anything that makes me afraid. First, you have to admit you are afraid. That's powerful. For men, it's like, I'm not afraid. Like most of you men in the room are afraid. Everyone's like, I'm not afraid. I'm a man. Therefore, I don't feel fear because men don't feel fear. Women feel fear. Men don't feel fear. And you're like, you're full of shit. Real men will be like, I'm fucking terrified. I am so terrified right now about X, Y, and Z. I am scared. Now you're going to have people's respect. Truly.
100%.
That's the theory, man. You will have people's respect. What you said a few seconds ago, you're coming on with Paul Lafrance, the great lord of all things decking on earth. Like, who are you to be talking to me? And meanwhile, why do you think I lead the conversation with, I'm a 12-year-old boy who just turned 11 and I can't wait to turn 10. It's intentional. It's an intentional way of trying to very gently slide a frequency across the table in any conversation that is making people, even in their minds, visualize me as a child.
I've been
Because
brainwashed this whole time.
you've been brainwashed the whole time. You've been hypnotized by my Millennium Falcon this whole time
I love it.
and my Rebel Alliance insignia because I want the mind to calm down. Whoever I'm speaking with to instantaneously know that I view myself as a child, to allow them to realize, okay, he's not coming in as like, all right, what do you have planned today? My time is very important because it lays the groundwork for an actual real conversation, right?
Yeah.
I could go on.
You could go on, but I want to take a left turn and mix it up a little bit here because one of the other things I wanted to know, and there, I'm sure there's multiple parts to this question, but I'll let you kind of summarize it for me. So, how do you get into construction, and how does getting into construction and showcasing your art lead into getting a spot on a network? Because I saw that from my bit of homework that I did for this conversation, I see that you do this thing for breakfast television, and then next thing you know, you're picked up. And I'm sure that's not exactly how it went, unless it was. But I'd like to know, like, how do those pieces fit together? Like, give me the trajectory of your career from, first deciding that you were going to get into any semblance of construction to all of a sudden being the deck god.
Yeah, no, there was no trajectory. And by trajectory, I mean like there wasn't like this laid out plan that I was following, that was meant to lead to television. Because it's impossible to answer that question without completing a thought from the previous comments. And that is, if people are coming up to me and saying, oh, sign an autograph for me or do this, that, and the other, I will always typically sign one of two things, right? Unless I'm sending a personal message to somebody. One is don't grow up. It's a trap. Think about that. It makes people think, right? It's like the adult world that we see is like the world that young people are like, you must now come and join us in the adult world. But meanwhile, the adult world is ruled by people that are entirely consumed by fear, wondering why young people don't want to join. So there's a difference between childlikeness and childishness, right? The reason why people love to deck out so much is because it was kind of took people off guard because it looked like nobody there was operating with an ego trying to prove anyone else was better. Like we weren't competing against anybody. It was just a bunch of kids led by the biggest one of them all, creating something whimsical a lot of the times, a place for escape. We weren't taking ourselves too seriously, and we laughed our asses off. But yet we built something that was amazing.
Yeah.
And so you have these two combinations that were just bizarre to people, and that was this draw. So, but childlikeness, because when you're a kid, and this goes into the trajectory question, when you're a kid, everyone's heard the expression, dance like nobody's watching. People ask you what you want to be, and you're not limited to like, when you're a kid, it's like, I want to be the intergalactic emperor. I want to travel between dimensions and create time travel, like Doc Brown. And then you get older, and then like the world hits you, and it's like, well, what do you want to be? Well, according to my skill set, apparently, I'm just going to work in a sewer, and hopefully not sewers with alligators because that's scary. It's like adult world just changes you.
Yeah.
And Picasso had a great quote, and that quote is, "Every child is born an artist. The difficulty is remaining one when you grow up." So I always kind of gravitated to this, and like by starting my own business, like I got married at like 23 years old because after I left school, I went, everyone was like, "What are you, crazy?" I'm like, "You're getting married? Like you're nuts." I know. I'm like, "Oh, it's because I like doing things differently," and getting married that young, and I was like, my wife and I just had our 24th wedding anniversary, and as a musician at the time, it was like, well, now we have this thing called like a mortgage. Have you heard of these things? They're a pain in the ass. And then because you have a mortgage, you have to like get a job. You have to get a job to pay for the mortgage, right? And as an ADHD, undiagnosed ADHD, 22-year-old at the time, I was just like, what? I don't know. I don't like this. No, I just want to make
Doesn't
music.
work for me.
Doesn't work for me. Like, no. And then my wife, who was the law clerk, is like, is sitting there going like, well, honey, let me explain to you how the world works, So, after working in a bookstore for a year after we got married, just because I had to have at least a job, where I was like, by the end of that year, I was, buying chocolate laxatives to slip in people's coffee just to break the monotony. My buddy comes up to me and working out of Mississauga, and he's like, I have a fence and net company in Mississauga. Do you want to come work for me? It wouldn't have mattered what he said to me at that point. He could have been like literally, I live underground and I collect earthworms, but I have to eat the earthworms and poop them out and study the internal organs and find out how my stomach acids affected the earthworm.
You would have taken it.
I would have been like, when do we start? Let's go.
Yeah.
And so I show up on this job site, and I'm driving now because I grew up in Mississauga, but now I'm married, living in Pickering. And this is before they fixed the 401 going across the top of Toronto. So in order to go from Pickering to Mississauga in rush hour, it took at least 7 days just to travel one way. Like it was insane, and there was no portals that you could skip over this like there were in my mind as a child. So you just had to drive, in a car and a highway, and it's horrible. And so arriving there, I'm just like, this is a really long drive. This is terrible. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do this. And then I see all these tools all laid out on the lawn, and they were all like, all black and yellow tools. And I was like, oh, those look like Tonka trucks, honest, swear to God, at the time, I'm a 23-year-old man at this point, and I'm looking at all the colorful tools that are designed to make men go, ooh, those remind me of the toys I had when I was little.
Yes.
And girls too. But, this is me, and I'm a boy. This is my story. So, I'm going to stick with the male narrative. And so then I'm starting to build fences. At the end of the day, I am seeing what's being created. I am building something with my hands, and I'm like, you're breaking new ground now, Copernicus. You're on to something. And these toys make noise as well, but they're very sharp, so you have to be very careful. And this was fantastic until 3 months goes by, and I'm building the same fence. I've built 7,000 linear feet of fence at this point, and I'm already stopping by at the Shoppers Drug Mart to pick up chocolate laxative just to, again, break the monotony.
Yeah.
And so that's how it began. So my boss one day sees me getting squirrely, and he's like, why don't you come into this backyard with me, and we can work on this deck together. And, I have dramatized this day many, many times. And it works. The dramatization works because you have to understand that up to this, I wasn't looking for a career. I was against the system.
Yeah.
I left school. No, all I had to do to finish high school was complete 2 underwater basket weaving courses. Like I could have, taken literally underwater basket weaving and, the mating rituals of the 3-toed sloth, and I would have graduated. But I didn't, because I was like, I don't agree with the system. I don't agree with a system that says you have to map out your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm still answering the trajectory question, just so you know.
Yeah, I got you.
So when guidance counselors would come to me in high school, and I'm just like, well, what is this plan that all young people are supposed to be following? What does this mean? And they're like, listen, Paul, we've explained this before. Sit down, and here's the whiteboard. We're going to explain this to you very, very clearly. Just focus and pay attention. Here's what you're supposed to be doing. Right now, at 17 years old, with a body full of hormones and a face full of acne, you're supposed to decide what you're going to do for the rest of your life so that you can become focused, get the grades you need in order to get into the university you're supposed to get into, and graduate from that university with honors after 17 years. And then when you leave, there'll be a guy there in like a trench coat and glasses looking like Will Smith from Men in Black. And he's going to take you off to your dream job, which you're going to meet your wife or your husband, depending on your sexual preference. And at that point, you are going to buy your first house. You're going to fill it with stuff. You're going to buy your second house, fill that with stuff. You're going to have 1.5 children or multiple pets, 1.5 pets, and then live happily ever after. And I'm like, well, if that's true, then why are you people all so miserable? Now, they didn't like that very much.
No kidding.
Because they knew I was right. They knew I was right. You can't lay out a trajectory path for a human being. Every human is a universe unto themselves. Every person is so unique and individual that human beings, we mean well when we try to put people into categories, right? But really, what we don't realize we're doing is we're doing the same thing as putting people in cattle cars in Germany. We're still just going, you go over here and you people go over here. And it's like, whether it's diabolically intended or just innocently intended, you can't compartmentalize human beings ever. And so career path trajectories are so frustrating. I wish to God at that stage in life, I had known that the trades was an option for me. I found it accidentally. I found it because I was bored out of my tree But if I was in high school and walking into some of the trade schools that I've walked into, I'm just like, I'm sitting going, this looks amazing. You guys look like you're having some fun. I hate all of you because I'm jealous because I didn't
Yeah.
have this. I would have woken up for school and actually gone to school with a skip in my freaking step, man. If I, if I was looking and going, I could have been doing this all day. I now have all these skills. I can build my own house from the ground up and do it all myself. That's cool. But I'm lucky because of the fact that my brain works the way that I was like, I want to do it. So therefore, I'm going to find out how to do it. And I live in an age where there's the technological ability to like just learn online whatever you want to figure out. But damn, like how many kids just ended up going off into trajectories of life where they're sitting at a desk and they hate their jobs. And this is 50% equal, men and women. I
Yep.
have 4 daughters. My eldest daughter is in welding. She's like about to graduate from first year welding and she loves it. And she's going to make way more money than all of her friends way earlier in life because the country's going, pardon me, is there any welders? Are there any welders around? Is there no welders? We have 4 welders in Canada because everyone's retired. We might need some welders. What is your dog weld? We'll take the dog. We'll take the dog and we'll pay the dog $100,000 a year to start. Like it's insane.
Yeah.
So I'm there at this stage of life going, I am now quitting after I go into the backyard. I'm ADHD, but I do circle back. So I'm in this backyard now with my boss. And he's building the most boring deck the world has ever seen. Now, I didn't know anything about business. I just knew it was boring. And my greatest fear in life was being bored. So I'm just like, no, man, dude, this could be so much more. This should be the musician in me is like coming out. I'm like, this could be impacting the lives of the people living in this house. And he's just looking at me like, what the hell's wrong with you? You know, I was like, no, man, like, boom, I'm like, this could go here and this could be here. You go put this on the corner. You can catch the angle of the sun coming in from this angle. And they could be staring off of that little patch of sky, which also happens to be the darkest place in the sky. And the Hubble Space Telescope showed that in that dark place of the sky, there's 52 billion universes that aren't stars. They're universes, man. And, and my boss is like, stop. Yeah. Paul, please, for the love of God, stop talking, is what he said. And I realized that's not going to be possible, as you well know. And so I quit. And I started my company. I started Paul Lafrance Design, which at the time was cutting edge construction and design. And I had no idea what I was doing. I broke all of these rules. Like I didn't know that according to business school, when you go and see a client, you're supposed to wear a golf shirt with an insignia of your company. You're supposed to be friendly, but not familiar. You're supposed to spend some time, but not too much time. Then leave and let them go about their life and then follow up later with a very polite, but not intrusive phone call or email or whatever. I would show up looking like I just walked off stage at a rock concert because that's how I dressed. I would walk into the house and within a few minutes announce the wonderful journey of having, you know, depending on the timeline, 3 or 4 daughters. And I would lead with information and find out whether they had kids. And then I would begin to ask very intrusive questions like, who are you? Tell me about your soul and your fears and what is it that you, in order for me to design for you, I need to know you. And people love to tell their story. People love to tell their stories. People are aware of the fact that other people in the world don't know their personal story. But the real tragedy is the belief that people don't want to know. And if I'm asking you, tell me your story, and you're half expecting me to be like, is it going to be long though? I have a tea time, and I would stay 4, 6, 8 hours. Like I had designed the project at the table in front of them. They had already signed off, and it's now 2 a.m. and we're talking, and they're like, Paul, you do have to go home eventually, right? You do know this, right? Like it just broke all these rules, and it worked. It worked. And I was defeating all of my competition. I didn't even know I was competing. I just didn't want to be bored. I had no idea how to price anything out. my wife would be looking at the final profit and loss. I'm like, what's a profit and loss? She's like, well, when you build something for somebody and you decide that it has to have the golden calf vomiting, molten lava in the middle as a showcase, otherwise it's just not complete. The design isn't complete. Even though they said they couldn't afford that, you're like, yes, no, I hear you. Just leave it with me because it has to be right. And my wife is like, honey, I'm going to teach a new word to you. It's called bankruptcy. And so, I had to learn as I went. But regardless of the fact that I was not even remotely financially successful, as I was learning how to do business, the creativity became well known. I became the go-to guy to go to because people would be telling these stories like it was like the stuff of legend. And I was doing interiors as well, right? So you had
Yeah.
this guy came by and you did what? Like my contractor came by and they do it in and out and it's very professional and bow and then they leave. And then I'm there like talking about my family and like personal and like, hey, and they're like going out dinner. I'm like, hey, sure. Well, then I'm having a beer and a scotch or whatever. And I'm designing it in front of them. And they're like, this guy's amazing. And you paid. And then they tell me like, oh, wow, you got a great deal. And I'm at home going, do we have any craft dinner?
The struggles.
Yeah. But this is what led. So there's two moments. There's the first moment, which was about 3 years in when I'm in the backyard and I had just finished this project and I heard my client talking over the fence to his neighbor, like Wilson and like Home Improvement,
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, yeah. And he's like, yeah, man, now my deck is officially bigger than Frank's 3 doors down. Who's the man now? And he's like literally all but holding a big Texan belt buckle. And I was like, oh, I'm out. No, no, no. I can't do this anymore. This is like keeping up with the Joneses. I'm just adding to this, like, my whole counterculture brain just went like ballistic. And it was at that point that this like revelation hit me. There was a friend at the time gave me shit. He's like, you don't have any idea what you're really doing here. And I was like, no, I'm quitting. I'm leaving. And he's like, okay, stop being a wallowing asshole and sit down for a second and explain something to you. And he's like, you have no idea what you're doing differently that has nothing to do with keeping up with the Joneses. He goes, Paul, you are creating places of rest for people in a world that's gone crazy. Now, imagine how much more significant that is now with like the whole global pandemic thing entering in.
Oh, yeah. Right.
This was then. And this light bulb went on in my head, and I realized I'm not a carpenter. I'm not a designer. I'm not a musician. I'm not a celebrity. If I'm going to be anything, it's someone that legitimately wants to live life in an outward way. My true happiness is based on the fact that if what I've created actually has the ability to slow somebody's life down so they can gain perspective and the psychology factors of all this would be like, I have certain design elements that go completely out of the box all the time. Like I want you to get as far into your yard as you can. I don't want you staring at your pressure treated fence in the neighbor's house and behind. I want the deck to be at the back of your yard, turned around facing your house, because there's your world. And in that world is all your stress, anxiety, fears, all in this box. And I want you turning and facing the box from outside the box, like everyone in the world is doing right now. At home going, I have had the opportunity for perspective for the first time, maybe ever. People are rethinking their lives right now.
It's amazing.
Around the globe, right? This is the kind of thinking that led me to be really developing this reputation of being like the philosopher carpenter was one of my favorites. And I was like, that's cool, man. Yeah, I like the sound of that, because I'll have the ego pumping through my brains at that point. But that changed the passion behind how I was doing it, which led to one day getting this phone call from Breakfast Television being like, we want you to do this. We made some inquiries and you are apparently a psychotic and creative person. And we want you to do this front porch for us on this crack house in Toronto. And we won a contest and we think you'd be good. And I was like, sure, whatever. Because this was a roller coaster. I'm just like, wherever it's taking, I'm just following this journey
Yeah.
without thinking too far ahead. Every time I made plans, they just ended up getting shot. It was just like, just be present, do what you're supposed to do today. The plans you're making for tomorrow just have to be non-emotionally based. What is a logical thing you have to, and it stay out of your freaking head, right? As business owners, we all know going to bed at night and your mind's going and the fear's going, and what if this happens? What if the client doesn't pay? And what if I've undercharged for this? And oh my God, and I'm going to end up living under a bridge being like, no, I used the wrong color boards. I used the wrong color boards. I used the wrong color boards. Like, it's like, you often wonder what leads people to being under a bridge. Now, all of a sudden, breakfast television happens. I do a 12-hour miracle makeover because I'm a musician, was on stage. Jennifer Valentine, my beloved friend, who this was the first time I had ever met her, shows up, and all the other contractors are like freaking out just because they're like a camera, it's live TV, and they're all like, oh, and they're like, hey, what did you do today? And the landscaper's like, I put in rocks and dirt, and she's like, ooh, riveting. She turns over and sees me, and I'm leaning up in my leather jacket. I'm like, what's up, bro? Because my personality type is one that is not remotely shy about getting up and talking in front of a group of people. And then that's when my executive producer, who had just came back from, he just got off a plane from Afghanistan where bullets are flying over his head, and he won like a Gemini Award for the documentary he did about the Canadian troops on the ground in Kandahar. I'm going, I might need to find something to do or I'm not going to die. And it turns on breakfast television for the first time ever. And there I am. He's like, this is an interesting cartoon character I'm watching. He really needs his own television show. And
Wow.
calls up my assistant, who was my sister, the next day. We was supposed to have a meeting with him the following week. 2 months later, we're sitting in the HGTV buildings. And they're going, well, what do you think about being on television? How would you handle that? I'm just like, sure, man, whatever. I'm not taking any of this too seriously anyway. And like, I'm not taking a lot of things very seriously. And then shortly after that, we're day one filming Decked Out and going, how did we get here? And that was 10 years ago. It's like, it is a serendipitous story. But like, people be like, how do we follow the same path you did? I'm like, you need to follow your path. If you try to recreate my path, you'll fall off the edge of the earth. I'm not one of those people, just so we're clear.
Now, in saying all that back to me, and I'm sure that you've said it hundreds of times, relive that story, but what emotions come up when you think back at how far you've come?
Very good question. The emotions that I would feel now is kind of like proof that you literally cannot. Well, man, I think for me, it's I can't deny that this stuff was laid out in a way, because I'm a very spiritual based person. And if you try to tell me that God wasn't involved in that trajectory of life, I'm going to tell you you're crazy. It'd be like literally saying the sun does not rise in the east in the morning. Like, it's just not, it's scientifically impossible for this to have lined up the way that it did. And it gives me encouragement because where I'm sitting right now, there's so much mystery. I don't know what I'm doing next. And I like that. I like the fact that I can be honest about that and be like, I have no idea what's next. I just, no clue. And I'm fine with that. Right.
It's exciting, right? A little bit.
Yeah. Well, it means life, that's the adventure.
Yeah.
Right. If you truly believe as a kid, if a parent says to you as a kid, life's supposed to be a roller coaster ride, it's supposed to be an adventure, and when you're on a roller coaster and you're looking, would you rather be the person who is gripping the bar like grim death, just like, ah, or the person that's like, woo? Because if the roller coaster goes flying off the tracks, I don't think that gripping the bar is going to save your ass.
That's a great way to put it.
It's not going to. It's like Santa's sleigh. You see the silhouette of like this roller coaster flying off the tracks, crossing the plane of the moon as it's going by, and then crashing into the highway, but about 300 feet away. By good thing I was holding on to the bar because I'm fine. Slight little abrasion on the head. Other than that, I'm good. Everyone else is dead.
Yeah.
Good thing I was living my life filled with fear. You might as well enjoy the ride. And I know that can sound a little bit airy fairy, maybe not necessarily focusing on anything remotely practical. Yeah, there's practicalities to running a business, there's practicalities to all kinds of things. But it doesn't mean the practicalities have to, for me, it's like, are the decisions that I am making being made because of practicality only? Because Jim Carrey had a great quote. He did this public acceptance speech. You can see it on YouTube. And they shortened it to a 3-minute video, and it's a fantastic video. And a lot of people are like, Jim Carrey's crazy, so therefore Paul Lafrance might be. I'm like, well, I may very well be. But he says most people live their lives in fear disguised as practicality. Well, I can't take that life path because it's not practical. Meanwhile, it's because there's no certainties.
Hmm.
And if there's no certainties down there, I'd rather stay here in the very wide path where at least I can at least guarantee what's going to happen to me to within a 82% ratio. And so therefore, I'm going to, even though this path is nowhere near this isn't even adventurous at all. This is like, this path over here is like taking a trip to Mordor with Samwise Gamgee, and we're going to be getting the ring. And this one over here is I'm going to be sitting in an insurance seminar for the next 20 to 30 years. But this is safer because it's insurance. And it's like going, wow, that sounds like I'd rather have bamboo shoots under my fingernails. It's like, oh my God. And that's how most people make their decisions.
You know what? It's crazy. Like over the last, I don't know, it's pretty much been my whole life, but over the last few months, there's been a lot of questions in my own life about that. Like, are you cool with going through the motions and doing those things you're doing every day because they are practical? You're taking the safe bet. Are you going to wake up at 65 and ask yourself if you made all the right decisions, and is the right financial and career decision going to trump the right adventure and lifestyle decision that you made? And are you going to be okay with that? And I think, I'm sure I'm not alone in that, but it's contemplation on a daily basis for myself is, are you living true to yourself? Are you going to look back on all this one day and say that you had the most fun and took advantage of the most opportunities and did it your way? Or did you do it the way everybody else told you it should be done? And are you okay with that?
Exactly.
It's tough, man.
Here's an interesting thought. I remember saying this at some public speaking events where afterwards people were coming up to me going like, oh my God, that you just said something that I'm going to be thinking about for the next 10 years. And then the people who were put on the event were coming and going, Paul, I think you're like, it was good, but it's getting a little deep. And I was like, oh, you want me to shallow it up for you? Is that what you want? Okay. No. And I always remember that comment because this is what I was talking about. Exactly what you just said. I said, all right, everyone, we're going to talk about death. You start most conversations, right?
Right.
It's like in The Princess Bride. Like, do you happen to have 6 fingers on your right hand? It's like, do you always begin conversations this way? It's like, all right, everyone. It's like a room full of people. Like an auditorium. There's like 500,000 people there, whatever. I'm like, all right, everyone, we're going to talk about death. There's like an opening line, but it gets people's attention. People are like, did he just say death? I think he said death. And I'm like, yeah, death. And people are like, where are you going with this, psychopath? And then I said, when we talk about death, we're going to talk about epitaphs. So now everyone picture it, the stone that is laid over your grave or your urn, whatever you choose. And the epitaph is what is going to be chiseled into the stone that defines your life in a very, shortened sentence. Like, epitaphs are hilarious. Like, I have lived 70, 80, 90, 100 years, and we're going to sum it all up in in like 6 words etched into stone. This is your life right here. These are the words. So choose wisely. It's hilarious.
No doubt.
Right. So I'm like, so here's my question to the audience. And it doesn't matter if it's 10 people or it's 1,000 people or whatever. It's always the same answer. I'm like, so what do we want it to say? Do we want it to say, this is how much money I made. This is how successful I was in business. This is the power that I attained. These are how many houses I owned, how many people worked before me, and this is how successful I was in business. And I'm not even done talking. And everyone in the audience is like, no. Again, because we're programmed to know that that's shallow, that that's not what brings happiness. And we're right. But everyone's like, no, shallow. like, all right, okay, I'm not concerned. Everyone seems to be in agreement.
Right.
So I'll be like, okay, so what do we want it to say? Do we want it to say this person lived life to the fullest? This person like did not let fear hold him back. He followed his dreams. He followed his passions. He loved well and invested in the relationships that were important and was loved well in return. This person impacted other people's lives. This person changed the trajectory of other people's lives. And everyone, like anything along those lines, outside of the realm of the statistical money business, blah, 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 everyone's like, yes, that's what we wanted to say. Yes. And I was like, okay. And we're all in agreement there too. So here's the point. Well, isn't it funny then, humans of the world, if you're statistical, and this is with me being conservative, that we will spend 90% of our time investing in the very thing that we don't want written on our epitaph. And maybe if you're in that upper echelon, maybe 10% of your time invested in what we do want written and carved in stone to define our lives. And then I just leave another dramatic pause, and confuse people. They're like, I thought we were going to talk about tracks, but it's so true, right? And that's why traditionally I've never given the normal straight answers to questions in an interview. Because no matter how tired I am, doesn't matter that I woke up 10 minutes before we did this, where I'm like, normally it takes me on an average day at least 2 hours to 3 hours to come online because I am a night person. I am awake and alive at night and blah, blah, blah. So this is the proof, because this is normally my cranky time of day, where everyone just leaves daddy alone and lets daddy do his reading and do his design work and just put on headphones and wait for my crankiness to leave my body.
Yeah.
'Cause I went to bed at 5 in the morning, like a jackass. But I instantaneously talking about this stuff will always just bypass whatever the hell is happening with me physically or chemically. This is the shit, right? It connects and applies to everything.
It's life.
It's life,
Yeah.
And do I want to spend more time working with organizations like Skills Canada? And do I get paid to go to those events with thousands of kids who have the opportunity to maybe find a life path that they've been programmed to believe would be like a lesser than life path? Does that fucking piss me off? That's still there in people's mindsets? Yeah. And not because it hurts my ego. It pisses me off because ignorance can be leading our children into a life of boredom, monotony, and a life ruled by fear disguised as practicality. Just simply because they didn't even have the option of like 50 opportunities over here to be doing something that you never even realized was available to you, because the generation surrounding you, and this isn't shitting on parents or faculties, it's just programming, right? So it's
100%.
being judgmental, waste of time, but it's just the way people are programmed. And that's, I hate the systems that are there in place. That's what I balk against, right? I don't believe there's some diabolical person with a big mustache just sitting there twisting, how can we destroy the lives of our children's future? Maybe there is somewhere in a Bond cave somewhere where that opens up. But that's going to piss me off. That's going to put me on a platform to want to break those stigmas, because they were set in place. I read a stat recently where it was like, to this day, if you were to just ask the average parent, out of 100 parents, would you rather your child become a professional in this area, doctor, lawyer, whatever those areas are?
White collar, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah.
Or the trades, and they just left it, or life working within the trades. It was like 2% still today, 2 out of 100, because the trades still mean you just couldn't cut it academically.
Yeah. It's a backup plan. It's not a choice.
I want to take a bazooka to that stigma. That's what needs to be firebombed and napalmed. And people's brains need to be plugged into a machine to be reprogrammed like the Matrix. And I wish I could do that at the snap of a finger, but something about mind control is like bad or something. I don't know.
Love it, man. Hey, this has been awesome. One of the ways I typically wrap up these podcasts, besides asking if there's anything else that you want to talk about, and I know that we've touched on so much here, is I like to ask three things.
Sure.
And the first thing that I like to ask is, what do you think the construction industry currently does well? You can take that however you want.
I am becoming more and more excited about the women in the trades factor. Now, obviously, it's a personal, close to home thing for me
Yeah, your daughter.
because I've got four girls and I legitimately want my four daughters to do whatever the hell they want. And when I would fight through the stigmas. So I'm glad that men are starting to act more like men, because if a man has an issue with a woman in the trades and that's a threat to him because it's taking another man's job, you're not a man. You are a boy. That's a soundbite you can use wherever the hell you want. If any guy has a problem with a woman in the trades, you're not a man. You're a boy. Because every man knows when they're looking in the mirror and they hear the words coming out of their mouth. Every man knows whether it's the words of a man or the words of a little boy. If it's like, you're going to be coming and you're going to take my toy away. It's my toy. I had the toy first and you're coming and taking my toy. You're a boy. Don't say you're a man and do that. The encouraging thing is that's changing.
It is.
Seeing that happen. So now the next problem is the bigger problem. Ladies, shut up and support the women that are in the trades, because you're the real problem. It's actually not the men. It's the women that are having a hard time with these other women that might be on the job site with their husbands. If you're a woman in the trade, you have to look like a man. You have to have a neck that's bigger than your head, and you can't look like a woman. You can't be a woman. Like, you want to talk about like living this firsthand with Katie, like in the shit this girl went through. Because how dare you be in the trades and be an attractive woman? Because you're going to be a distraction to these other guys. Like, ladies, like, seriously, as Betty White would say, like, grow a vagina. Seriously. Be women and support women. Like, and I said this, I didn't say the vagina part, but I said this because vaginas are tougher than, like, people say grow some balls. Betty White said, balls are weak and feeble. You flick them the wrong way and we're like,
yeah.
So, like, people should say grow a vagina because those things can take a pounding. Betty White. I'm like, I love this one forever and ever. Amen. Oh my God, what a great statement. Right? Are historically the bigger problem holding women back in the trades because of this sense of distrust. And mind you, the distrust has been caused by men being assholes in the past or whatever the hell. It's like, that causes women to be suspicious and therefore they take it out on their fellow women. Stop doing that. Don't do that. Support the women that are going into the trades, not just for the sake of just standing by your own and pushing them forward. This is progress, but the country also needs women in the trades. We desperately need them. And like, it's a well-known fact that women make better welders than men. And I want the guys to get pissed off and be like, no, that's not true. And I want them to be like, yeah, that's cool. I like to hear that. And then prove that otherwise then. Have a fun competition with it, but don't resist it. As you can see, I may have some passionate feelings on the matter.
Yeah, I love it. You know what? Awesome. Thank you for supporting that. Shout out to Noor over at Build a Dream, who is a great friend of mine that we've developed an awesome relationship over the past few months. And she just had 3,000 women and their men and women and their daughters come on for Career Expo and skilled trades and sciences, technology, mathematics. So things are going in the right direction. But like you mentioned, the women need to grow a vagina. And the men also, I think, just to round off that point, think about when a woman's on a job site, if that was your daughter, how would you treat them? What kind of conversations would you be having when that girl or woman is on the job site? It doesn't mean that you have to ruin the boys club or any of this stuff that we've talked about. And the banter doesn't need to leave the room, but you have to be a man, like you said, not a boy, and show some respect and respect yourself. And I don't care if there isn't even a woman on the job site, just be a respectful human being, because not all of us want to hear it either. So with that being said, and I think we've kind of touched on this maybe, but what's one thing we need to do better?
Yeah, I think we could combine those two together.
Yeah, it's
right.
pretty much it.
when I was asked to be the keynote speaker a few years back in the Jill of all trades event, which was like, this is an event for women in the trades. I'm like, and they're asking me to be the speaker. And I was like, you do know I have a penis, right? You guys are aware. Like I'm a man or a woman who's really let herself go. That was one of the greatest honors of my life, and it was like being at home. It's just that, I'm like talking to my daughters if it was an auditorium full, but I said this stuff and I was like, you guys got to back each other up. And so yeah, I think we're doing it well. We are pushing these envelopes and we're not ignoring these issues. And the fact that we have to replace people that are retiring. And, I remember the statistic years ago being like, by 2020, we're going to be 1 million trades people short. And, now we're in 2020, but we do have this global pandemic thing. So it's kind of hard to get the statistics right now as to where we actually are,
Yeah.
until this small little thing goes away. But that's what we're doing well. And yeah, the women need to back up the women. And it's one of the more unconscious things, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like the difference between pride and false humility. Pride is a person who's like, I think I'm better than anyone else. And false humility is actually a more dangerous form of pride. It's like, well, I'm nothing and I'm no good and I'm like, blah, 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 blah. And it's like going, from a spiritual perspective, it's like, you're created the way you're created. Stop saying what you can't do and look at what the gifts that you've been given and operate out of that place and stop like being like, no, but I'm feeble and nothing. It's like, that's actually still thinking that you're responsible for what was placed in you to do. That's a whole other topic, but anyway.
Okay, last question is, what's one ask? If anybody makes it this far in the podcast and you have their ears for this, whatever, last few minutes, what's one ask you have somebody listening, anybody out there?
It's going to be the shameless plug, but people can decide whether or not this sounds authentic or not. I spent 2.5 years putting together Backyard Revolution. So Backyard Revolution is backyardrevolutiontv.com. That's where you go to watch the show. It's like a buck an episode, or it might even be less. I think it might be like 79 cents an episode or something along those lines. But I want people to watch it, particularly people in the trades. And I want people's feedback. This is my ask. I want to know if I nailed it or not. I want to know whether people are watching it and going, yeah, I do relate to that. Yes, that does happen. Yes, it's real. And the places where it's not authentic is because I'm intentionally being non-authentic to be funny.
Right.
Right. I'm doing a skit scene, which I will lead into it by saying, and now for a shameless plug. Like, you know what I mean? It's decked out meets Deadpool. That's the whole premise of the show. It is turning the camera around, making fun of ourselves, making fun of the genre, and yet still creating something that's really not only entertaining to watch. The product is incredible. The characters are incredible. But I want the feedback on the vulnerability. I want to know, my ask is, I want to know when you watch Backyard Revolution, does watching that actually bring you to a place of perspective on how to carry yourself in your own business? Does the vulnerability, does it help you? Watching it, does it make you feel like if I can be this vulnerable, that'll help you to be this vulnerable? Because that'll make 2.5 years of my life putting into this really, really worth it. Making this like this high level entertaining, like the quality of this is better than even the HGTV shows that I did. It's not knocking the quality of the people. It's just the amount of time that we put into making sure everything was just right. At the end of the day, that's just the icing. The meat of this damn show is to put something out there that breaks stigmas. And it transcends just the fact that we're building a beautiful backyard. It's a much bigger thing that I'm trying to tackle, which is why I even threw in me jumping out of a plane and preparing myself for a tragically hip concert right after my hero Gord passed away of brain cancer, to do this charity concert where my voice was in way worse shape than it is even this morning as a vocalist. And I have to go do vocal lessons. And if anyone's watched anyone ever do vocal lessons, it ain't pretty, man. It's not pretty. It's ugly. And the camera's right here. Because if you're going to do anything, you might as well do it all the way. If you're going to be vulnerable, then you got to be vulnerable all the way. And that's the feedback that I want people to give me. BackyardRevolutionTV.com is where you're going to see the show.
And obviously, I create show notes and a comprehensive page for every guest on my website, toolspodcast.com. So if you are having troubles finding Backyard Revolution, you can head over there, and the links to everything that we talked about, as well as Backyard Revolution, will be there. And Paul, if people do want to leave you direct feedback, where's the best place to do so?
Obviously, we have everything being posted on our Facebook site. So the direct feedback would actually be on the Backyard Revolution Facebook site.
Okay, so we'll link to all that stuff. And
Yeah.
if there's any specific places that you find out about after that you want us to point people in the direction of, then it'll be available on the website, toolspodcast.com. And you can just navigate straight through. And I hope people watch, man. I'm looking forward to digging into it myself. And I really appreciate you taking an hour and a half on a Saturday. I know that you're up at Georgian Bay. You've got some glass stuff to put in on your deck. And it's been awesome, man. I really appreciate the vulnerability and everything that you're doing for our women, for the industry, for skilled trades, breaking down the barriers, the status quos. It's been unreal getting to know you, and I look forward to catching up again in the future. So thanks so much for coming on.
100%, my friend. Let's do it again. And just keep giving awesome interviews, buddy, because you got skills, man. You got
Thanks.
mad skills.
Really appreciate it.
Have a good one, pal.
You too. Take care.
That's a wrap. That's a wrap, everybody.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Tools of the Trade podcast. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and leave us a 5-star review. For show notes, blog posts, resources, and access to our newsletter, check out toolspodcast.com.